Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Marilyn Shannon, and this is Through Their Eyes. And I'm probably one of the most fortunate women in the world because I get to be here on the second Monday of every month with Nick and Josh. And Nick is a college student getting ready to graduate from NC State, and Josh is a high school freshman, believe it or not. And they are two brilliant individuals who are hosting this show where we invite conversations surrounding our teens, young adults to talk about anything they want to talk about. Now, that's a hallelujah moment. So please, if you're listening to us now, stay for the whole show. You won't believe what these two will come up with. I will be here, but I'll be in the background. Please feel free to put your name under the chat, and your nickname is fine. And you can comment, ask questions from there as well. And you can call into the studio at 919-518-9773. And we will take your questions and comments and thoughts and ideas from there. And you can also join us on voice, and that would be to come in on Skype. And that would be at computers, and that's plural, then the number 2K voice. And you will come in on voice. And we'd love to have you. Please feel free to join us. This is part of the mission here, is to get a good conversation going. And we want to talk about everything. And there is nothing off the table, because we know that when we talk, we come out of hiding. We're no longer invisible. Our self-esteem grows. Our interest grows. Our desires grow. And that's what we want for our young adults and our teenagers. And we want them to feel like they are part of the human race. And it's confusing out here now. And we want to help make it a little less confusing. Or maybe we'll confuse it up more, but we'll be okay with it. So with that, let me turn it over to Josh and Nick. Gentlemen,
Yes,
take it away.
Thank you so much, Marilyn, for everybody listening. Hi again. If this is the first time you're getting to meet me, I'm Nick. Like Marilyn said, I am a senior at NC State University down in Raleigh. I'm actually currently joining you guys from Florida as I'm on spring break currently, but wouldn't miss this podcast. Had a great time producing it with Josh last time. I think we had a lot of great conversations, and I can't wait to see where this one goes. But before we get too far into that, how are you doing today, Josh?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. So I'm doing pretty good today. I just had a normal day of school, but I was definitely really excited to get into this one. I remember that I'm not trying to like kick into things too quick, but we were talking a little bit right before we started the show today. And I know you wanted to talk about some stuff related to like stigmas. So if I'm hoping to make today's episode more about like the teenage brain and the adolescent brain, kind of getting into how these like stereotypes form. When you brought that up, were there any specific examples of stigmas you could think of like going on in your current life that you kind of see around you?
Yeah, the stigma I thought of kind of came. It's not really about me directly, but I was doing some work on like the mental health of athletes and kind of all the pressure and stress that kind of athletes at all levels face. And one thing I really noticed was that like high school, probably middle school, even through college and pro. So that's an age range of probably 15 to 35, if not even more than that. All athletes have this kind of stigma around them that they got to be tough. They have this great life. You're strong, you're confident, everything. And that I feel like there's a stigma around athletes' mental health that way. And that kind of got me thinking into more general stigmas too. Even just kind of the classic, be a man, put your emotions behind you, or women tend to be very, very much more outward emotionally that way. And I kind of just started thinking about why that is. Like, why do these certain types of people always have to be acting this certain type of way? Again, it came to me with the athlete. I played sports growing up my whole life. I'm still a huge fan. But why is that type of person have to act this certain type of way? I was really trying to think of the meaning behind it, and kind of drew a blank, and I wanted to talk about that. So I know that's kind of a long winding route to get to. I don't really know, but I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, adding on to that, my first thoughts when you brought up things about like the whole like be a man or like the gender role stigma is I've been thinking it could have something to do with biology too. Like from my standpoint, when you think about kind of like more biologically how we're meant to act, like how in the past there have been like from like an ancestral perspective, if there are certain like hormones that might be guiding the actions of like specific genders, I've wondered if that plays a role. Because when people want to like fulfill their own individual purpose, part of that is guided from their actual like, I guess, biological composition. So obviously that definitely plays a role. But in today's society too, we already see like a lot of movement towards changing on stigmas like that. From an athlete's perspective, since you've been studying things with like sports medicine and athletes' mental health, do you have an idea of like, some basis to start off of on why you think athletes struggle with their mental health because of stigmas?
Well, yeah.
And
I
can I
think
interrupt you a second?
sure.
And when you talk about this, talk about it maybe, and I love that you brought this up because I consider myself to be a stigma squisher. That's why one of the reasons we're doing this, because I want to make things clear, and I think stigmas stand in our way of communicating, getting close, understanding each other. So when you look at the idea of stigma, Nick, you refer, talk about it maybe in terms of what it looks like for young adults, college students, high school students, as opposed to even, like me.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Well, when I say stigma in this case, with an athlete or anybody else, I think it's like kind of like a unwritten rule, but that everybody follows, or at least people feel pressure to follow, kind of like a norm, that may not be accurate of how people really feel, but it's how people kind of feel like they have to feel or they should feel. Again, based on whether that's norms, based on maybe it's their upbringing, maybe it's the community they live in. They're kind of world that way. So Josh, getting back to your point, with athletes, and I guess Maryland too, to me, what I think of the most is an athlete really not feeling very good, whether they feel super anxious to play, whether they don't really enjoy playing their sport anymore, but they're really good and have to keep doing it because like say their whole identity revolves around being a football player or being a basketball player. If they're not really enjoying that anymore and feel like they're so gifted, you got to keep your head down, keep trucking through it, and you're not getting any joy out of it. In fact, it might even be counteractive to them, or they feel a ton of pressure from family, from coaching, from maybe it's they need to get money to get a scholarship to help your family out, if your family isn't very well off, um, or even somebody's kind of very naturally gifted, but they have another interest that they want to follow. Somebody's a superstar baseball player, but they would rather go into music or rather go into acting. But there's a lot of I feel like there would be a lot of negative energy around that. And then that's kind of where I got that stigma word from, that external outside pressure to kind of stay in there, um, you know, head down. You're not allowed to speak up about it because you are an athlete and your life's easy. Whether it's a high school athlete, walking around one of the popular kids, whether it's a pro athlete making millions of dollars a year, or whether it's a college athlete in the middle or really anybody else. I think a lot of those feelings can be applied.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm actually glad we brought that up to clarify it because one thing I guess I actually realized we kind of have a distinction in how we view the word stigma. So your version of stigma is more externally based. Like I realize it's about more like that outside pressure that causes somebody to conform. When I think of stigma, I still think of it similarly, but I think from my more high school perspective, like being in that environment around teenagers, I viewed stigma as more like I guess similarly, certain expectations people have of the way you are, not as much as the way you act. So I've always associated stigma with something just similar to it can be as basic as you're in this club, for example. So that automatically means that you're a certain way. And I mean, the stigma you brought up, another point I wanted to make to it is I definitely think even teenagers can really relate to that part about you're being like a superstar baseball player, but you still kind of want to pursue something else. Because one of the deepest internal struggles, at least from like me analyzing the situation, is definitely that when you're really good at something, you can't tell if you truly enjoy it or not. Because on one hand, you have an aptitude towards doing it. And like in the example of sports, if you're super good at sports and you're making millions of dollars, you might be having a lot of fun making millions of dollars, but are you having a lot of fun playing the sport? And that's a really hard distinction. Even for me, I've been having a struggle deciding in my own head whether like doing something like drama or theater, I have so much fun doing it. But on the other hand, I can do something else I have a way more of an aptitude for, whether it's like science related, tech related. And I'm getting two different types of benefits. And that's where it's really hard, I guess. Also because of the fact that if your family is pressuring you to go down a certain route, you might think it's the right route because you're gaining the joy of making them proud. So, how do you decide whether making the people around you proud outweighs the benefits of just doing something you yourself enjoy?
Yeah, man. I don't think that there's one clear cut answer to that. I think every situation is very different. And the thing I kept thinking of is maybe just trying to find that balance in your life. I think in today's world more than ever, there's a lot of opportunity to do kind of anything and everything you want, and you can do like you can do a lot of different things at once too. Um, I think in for a high school student, I think today more than ever, it would be cool if you were, playing three different sports and in three different clubs and a very good student too. Kind of getting back to your other point about the internal versus external application of the word stigma, I feel like I absolutely hear you that for like the high school perspective, people kind of get identified with what group they're in, whether it's jocks and athletes, or it's your nerds, or it's your music kids, or whatever it is. We've all heard those different stereotypes in movies and media, all that, even to an extent seen it in real life. I think we talked about this a little bit a couple weeks ago, but I feel like my world really opened up once I graduated from college, from high school, and moved on to college. I think everybody, for the most part, at least that I met, really kind of dropped those labels and dropped that mindset. I think, and I'd love to hear in the coming years how you experience this, Josh. But once you kind of get out and the world gets a lot bigger, once you kind of move on from that high school world, move into a new, whether it's college, whether you go straight into work, whether you take a gap year, whatever it is you do. I feel like once you kind of get over that hill, you kind of realize that those labels are much more superficial than they may seem. So I guess if there are high school kids struggling with a lot of that, should maybe try to keep that mindset. You're not just what group you're in, Marilyn,
You get that message out there, though. That's a big message, that you're not labeled, you're not that group. And because we can be in a million different groups, right? We can do all kinds of interests. So how do you handle that? And how bad is the feeling of being stigmatized in school and amongst your friends? And how bad is it? And so you're talking about like a label, and then you're talking about something that is you individual, but then you also are talking about things that could be group related. So can you expand some of your thinking into those areas as well?
Yeah, I definitely have some thoughts about that. Just coming from like someone who's still in a high school environment. I would say one really big thing that, and I want to address to Nick's point too, why does it change after high school? Like what's so special about the age group or the building? I would definitely say, first of all, addressing why it happens, my best guess would have to be that I think that the adolescent brain, and I'm guilty of this, everyone is, it's just easier for it to recognize things by patterns. It just makes your own life simpler. And so when you start to develop those patterns in your own mind about how certain people are, in a way, it's technically beneficial, right? If you can label off somebody as not the right person to talk to immediately, it's a lot easier for your brain to then filter out who's going to be like a good conversation to have versus who isn't. And obviously, the problem that comes with that is that your best friend could be waiting in a group that's completely different to you, and you never actually approach them. But because the brain tries to kind of weigh out, like, it doesn't want to face rejection, it always wants every social outcome to go correctly. I'm sure that it eventually does make stereotypes, and the consequence of those stereotypes is forcing people to conform. Because the second mistake the brain makes, which I definitely think is also a direct result of stigmatizing, is you yourself fear that you're going to change for the worse and pick up on the negative qualities that are stereotyped about a group. So, to clarify that point, for example, let's just say hypothetically you make the association in your head that the kids that are on the nerdier end, or the kids that study more, or the kids that are more school oriented, then also struggle more socially. If you end up making that connection in your head, you're now going to subconsciously limit yourself from becoming more academically intelligent, pursuing things like school, under the fear that you're going to end up also becoming less social. And I've actually had my parents bring up this point to me before. There's a difference because the teenage brain makes everything mutually exclusive. To have A, you can't have B. So if you want to be like smart, for example, you can't be as social. And so I think the only way to create a world in which those things aren't mutually exclusive is by A, proving it, which then goes down to people have to prove it by having a platform. For example, like this show might be a way for people to speak out. And the second main thing we can do is we ourselves need to be more open to seeing the full perspective. Because no matter what you do, no matter what group you stereotype, once you really get to know the people in it, you're obviously going to see differences in like how they actually are as people. So yeah, it's a little bit of a rant, but addressing Marilyn's point about what are the actual like effects of stigmatizing, I think the biggest one for me is it promotes the mutually exclusive mindset and it limits your capabilities. Like, why can't you be smart and athletic? You can. Nothing's really stopping you, other than the fact that society's pushing onto you that they're exclusive. And it does this because it's easier for teenagers in their head to make things exclusive for pattern recognition. So that's the main point I was trying to address with that. But Nick, if you have any thoughts on it in general, I'd definitely be open to hearing.
Yeah, sure. I think your comment that like the reason we kind of get mutually exclusive and develop those patterns of thinking is because your brain's trying to recognize patterns. I think you're absolutely right. But like at the same time, especially at a younger age, your brain's still developing. It's not all the way there yet. Your brain's absolutely going to make mistakes too. So I think again, I think you're absolutely right. For me, I know once I graduated high school, I had spent the first probably, I guess what, 17, 18 years of my life surrounded by those same people. I never changed school districts from first grade or yeah, from first grade through graduating. So like you're surrounded kind of in that bubble with that kind of limited mode of thinking. And again, it's not a bad mode of thinking. I get why it happens, but it's a not fully mature mode. So I think the combo for me of kind of graduating from that, moving on, and then even for me moving states, moving from Pennsylvania down to North Carolina, getting to meet an entire batch of brand new people, getting to live in a new area, learning a new culture, learning about a new school with NC State, and kind of everything with that, not just academic stuff either, the whole social circle, going to games, joining clubs, going to gyms and everything there, rather than in Pennsylvania. Combined, honestly, with getting a little older, getting to meet people, I feel like that helped me limit that mode of thinking more. And I think as I've gotten older, I've tried to recognize more people as a whole, rather than just whatever group, your sports kids, chess kids, music, those groups we're talking about. And it's making me think. I would love to kind of do a study or something on different groups of people, like a little cross sectional. Yeah, Marilyn.
So is there a difference between labels and stigmas? Because as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, and you're opening up a lot for me to listen to because I do not like stigmas. But a label, to me, a stigma is kind of something that's kind of like etched in stone, like people don't like. They don't have to, but I don't feel the same about a label.
Yeah, I agree. I think a label doesn't have to be good or bad, really. It's kind of an identifier, at least in my eyes. I think stigma definitely has a negative connotation to it. Um, Kind of for me, that expectation, whether it's what you do, whether it's what you're supposed to do, um, labels can certainly be involved in that, and there can be bad stigmas, bad connotations associated with different labels.
What's the worst stigma that you
Yeah,
all deal with? What is the worst stigma that you hear like that's happening through your schools?
Josh, I would love your perspective on that.
Yeah. I think definitely the biggest ones for me, I'm gonna have a couple. The first is I don't like to address this because like I don't like to address this like it happens all the time because like to the benefit of my generation, they actually do a pretty good job of being open-minded. But I would say the correlation between like intelligence and like athleticism is definitely a big one. Or just like proficiency in general. Like people there's a viewpoint, especially among the super athletics, that they can't be super intelligent. And the reason I don't like addressing this stigma, because I gotta throw it out there, is because it's still so like it sounds super dumb. It's obvious that that's not true. Like we've been taught ever since we were kids, there's not really a dumb jock or like a super nerdy nerd. But I still think that even though people don't directly realize they're stigmatizing, they actually make subtle notions about it. I mean, there's definitely a point where, people will make the jokes to me about like I probably don't go outside that much or things along that nature. And I'm not going to like defend or deny any of those claims. I just think the biggest issue with it is that their own mindset is so limited. And the reason I find those negative, and I also want to address other ones too, is because I don't like that groups of people have to split themselves from other people. Like literally, even I have friends, including me. We're all guilty of seeing groups of people like these kids at this table, for example, and kind of thinking in our head like we should just avoid all of them. But that exact grouping, when scaled, is also the same reason why countries go to war. Um, it's a really hard dilemma because on one hand, having like undying faith to a group, to a country in general is such a rewarding experience because you have such a strong community. But there is that considerable cost of the fact that having that so much faith in one group of people also leads to you losing faith in others to the point where that's how groups of people end up engaging in like battle, getting into violent conflicts. The biggest stigma for me though, going back to the original question, definitely for me would be the things relating to like intelligence versus athleticism. I know kids too who are really like athletic and they act a little stupid, but they're also very smart people. And they easily get branded off as being sort of like, on the dumber end. It's like no one can really be a good medium, no one can really be an all-rounder. One example to quickly bring it up would be I saw someone talk about how they're so athletic with all of their like nerdier friends that, and again I don't like to use the word nerd because it's still a little closed-minded, but they're so athletic with their groups of like intelligent friends that their intelligent friends kind of brand them as like the stupid one, but then they're always like the super smart one among their groups of athletic friends. And that whole concept of not being able to fit in with either is so common. Even if you're like mixed race, for example, you might not feel like you truly identify with one or the other. And if people were able to, I think, or to rephrase, I think the solution to that is making the group of people connected by the fact that they're different. The best groups I've been in are the ones that are completely diverse. They're diverse in their backgrounds, they're diverse in their race, they're diverse in their culture. And I think those groups end up being so tightly knit because they aren't linked by something they've kind of like been grown accustomed to their whole life. They're linked by this new sort of like manufactured bond of just relating to the fact that they don't relate or relating to the fact that they're different. So yeah, that was definitely like a long answer to it. But Nick, if you have anything you can add on to as to how you think like things changed going from high school to college, like where you kind of see like what are the philosophical differences that you see that have caused those stigmas or those labels to break apart?
Well, I want to say one thing first. I think you made an excellent point with the different role identities. I think that's a main part of life, and kind of our whole culture as we know it. Like that, you, Josh, you, Marilyn, you listening live, whoever it is, think of you interacting with your parents and siblings at home. Think of you interacting with your friends at school versus you interacting with friends at the gym or doing a social activity versus you interacting with like a professor or your boss versus you interacting with a partner, your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. People take on many different roles, and I think we can kind of not even realize it. But like you said, Josh, you could be the smartest guy in one group, but not all that athletic if it's a group of super athletic people, and then be one of the dumbest in another group, but one of the most athletic. You're still you. So those roles can be very blurry, very confusing. Um, I definitely feel like philosophically wise, going to college, like you mentioned, I certainly feel like I've gotten a much broader lens and like a more complete view of people, having gotten away from that initial high school bubble. Like if I knew like this guy is an athlete, this girl's the pretty girl, this guy's a smart guy, whatever. Um, Being able to kind of see how people continue to go on their own path and change, whether I knew them in high school or I just met them as a freshman, seeing them as a senior now, seeing, like I said, seeing people back home, seeing them change. I think you realize more that people also change. Like everybody's kind of the main character in their own life that way. So people aren't always going to be static that way. So I think philosophically, I've gained a lot of that. Um, and then back to what Marilyn was talking about before. One of the biggest stigmas that I absolutely hate, and I feel like I've personally struggled with, is just because you're having success, whether that's with your grades, whether that's with your social life, whether that's athletically with your job, whatever it is. Just because you're having success doesn't mean you still can't struggle. Um, and that could be like I think the most obvious example is um, mental health. But I mean, you're also allowed to struggle, um, socially with a relationship. Maybe if you're struggling with a friend group, um, you could be super athletic, doing great that way, but maybe you're struggling at work or struggling with school, and that's 100% okay. But I think a lot of people in that boat might think it's not okay, and they'll just try to bury it, not talk about it because they're ashamed of it.
Have
Um,
either one of you been stigmatized? You feel something specific
well,
that you have to deal with?
I something specific. I don't know how specifically, because I've always tried to be pretty well rounded. I definitely feel like there's some negative connotation around being in Greek life in college. Um, and I mean, as a member of a fraternity, I feel like probably from like an outside perspective, I'm sure I've been kind of judged that way prematurely. People not really knowing, and you can kind of be thrown into a group. Um, like I identified with a group kind of like that, not to bash on high school at all, that's not what I'm trying to do, but the like high school line of thinking, like we were talking about, group identity. But I don't know, that's a fascinating thing to think about. What do you think, Josh? Have you?
I mean, one example I can just think of that's more relevant today is the mask wearing, like right after COVID had ended, especially in school too. That brought upon like a lot of different stigmas because one, and I know this is maybe like a unique mindset or of sorts. One thing that made it hard for kids was some kids actually wore their mask. It depends, kind of the area, how things are, with the intent of just like solely staying safe. Some people wear it only when they're sick, some people always like to wear it. And then there's also kids that wear it because they're like still self-conscious about the way they look, or they're just not used to not wearing a mask. And sorting people into those categories actually brought upon a lot of issues, because I still remember there were points when I was still wearing a mask a lot at school, for example. And one kid actually, I think I approached them just to talk to them, said they weren't going to talk to me because I was wearing a mask. And so they just kind of and then they just kind of walked off. And it was because like just, and I'm not even gonna blame those people, because to some of them they associated the mask wearing with like an antisocialness. But it's really hard, right? Because the reasoning behind why people do those things is so different. And I think when people are rationalizing in their head why people other people do a certain thing, instead of taking into account all of the different factors, once their brains found one reason, they latch onto it. So it's regardless of the context. Let's say you're wondering in your head, you know, even on like a more darker example, why do some people get into alcohol, for example? It's really easy to maybe see a kid who's struggling with alcohol and then kind of just brand them off as very irresponsible. And then from somebody who's more conservative, it doesn't want to like do that underage, obviously, it's not legal, they you would brand them off as irresponsible. But if that kid is really struggling with mental health issues, for example, that push them to doing alcohol, that second perspective, now you just feel bad for them. Your feelings towards somebody based off something they do can shift so much by understanding the reason. And I brought it up to my friend once who was struggling with some mental health issues at the time, specifically regarding things like alcohol and drugs. And the way he put it for me is it's so easy to distrust people who are involved with those things. But and this is me quoting my friend. He said, if you and I are really close friends though, and you know I'm struggling with these issues, and I got like stuck in alcohol or drugs, you would never look at me with so much contempt as much as just feeling bad and trying to help me through it. So that to that point, I think a big distinction there is that these stigmas or like these labels come from a misunderstanding or not being able to take into account all the reasons why somebody does something.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that point. I was just thinking in my head, the best way to probably avoid that is by knowing that whole picture, knowing everything that's going on, because it's probably not just because like you said, somebody's irresponsible, or somebody's not wanting to talk to me wearing their mask. Going back a little bit to that COVID point you made, I was just thinking about how interesting it was. I feel like that stigma, perception, whatever, on mask wearing really kind of flipped back and forth a few different times. Like, I remember, I guess it's 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago now, when COVID was kind of first coming on, we didn't really know the full extent of it. And I remember going to Target specifically with my mom, going to try to get water, try to get, tissues, try to get all this stuff as COVID's coming on, and we saw the first few people wearing masks. We're like, hey, what are these guys doing? Why are they wearing masks? Because like I remember at that point we thought it might spread by touch, do this, that, but wearing a mask wasn't nearly a common thing. It's like, hey, what are these guys doing? Why are they wearing masks? Obviously, fast forward a year, fast forward 2 years, you see somebody not wearing a mask in a setting like that, it's even weirder. There's going to be a big group trying to probably avoid them, not wanting to get sick. And then honestly, kind of fast forward to now, especially in different parts of the country, it's kind of back to how it was before, where it's kind of back to you're the weird one if you are wearing a mask. And I feel like it's really interesting how that's changed, and that's evolved. Obviously, our understanding has changed. The situation has grown, of course, but even just over the course of less than 5 years, it's gone back and forth a few different times.
So let me ask you this.
Sure.
So stigma is a fear, right? It's people's outward way of relating to somebody else that they don't understand, they don't like, they don't want to get to know, they don't want to get to like. It's an experience, fear. Okay? What do we do about it?
Yeah. Like I kind of said, I feel like the best way to kind of eliminate that fear, eliminate that stigma, is to face it head on. If you're not sure about how something works, or you don't really know the full story behind somebody, or behind an action or activity, behind a group of people, whatever it is, if you get to know the kind of full circumstance, the the whole person, the whole group, I feel like you can understand a lot better why people do what it is that they do, why they act how they act, why they fear what it is that they fear, and then that kind of your perception of the stigma can be eliminated, because it is probably based in it's not something that isn't real, something that isn't there. Um, so yeah, the kind of long way to answer that, I really feel like you got to face it head on and really learn and kind of put that effort in.
Yeah, and actually to add to Nick's point too, I think a second thing that just crossed my mind talking about it is how important is it? To what extent do we really actually need to fix the issue? Because obviously there's some reason why certain stigmas exist, right? Like if people are worried about something happening, if people are worried about something going on, the stigma is going to exist. But what I also thought about is what level is really too much. There's a big difference between thinking in your head, I don't really like this guy, but I'll still talk to them, versus just outwardly saying something hateful to them just because of X, Y, or Z about them. And it's almost like comparing it to the analogy of if you're like a kid talking in class and you're like being quiet, like distracting yourself, you're only detracting from your own education. So similarly, if you just have a stigma that you keep to yourself, you're just lowering your field of people you could get to know or like. But then if you start yelling in the middle of class, now everybody's suffering. Likewise, how if you yell out your belief there, everybody is. So it brings up the point to me, is there a line where we do need, I guess I don't want to use the word stigma anymore because of the negative connotation, but we do need in our head some level of labeling. And then there's just a certain degree to which it's too bad. Like there's a certain degree to which we just shouldn't share the opinion, but we can keep it to ourselves. That's where I wonder if maybe the solution can't really be fixed.
Are we
Yeah.
too opinionated? Are we too negative? Are we not accepting enough? Are there too many stigmas? Too many I's to dot and T's to cross? You have to do too good in school. You got to do great on the field. If you don't meet it, there's a stigma attached.
Well, I mean, how I see it, that's honestly that's human nature. I think we're naturally very critical thinking beings. It's the reason we've been able to be much more clever than say a lion or a tiger. Like if we got into a fight, just fist fight versus a lion or a bear or something, we're done. A human's not going to win that fight. But I mean, I do think that's kind of the root of it. We're naturally very critical thinking. We're very clever beings. So we are going to make our perceptions that way. Um, it's a it's a great point though. Trying to find that fine line, um, kind of between using your instincts that way and then being, for lack of a better term, I guess, ignorant. Trying to like cutting somebody or cutting a group off just because you don't know enough. Um, Maybe that line has a certain level of intelligence to it. Maybe it's a certain level of experience. Just having years under your belt, meeting different people, meeting different groups of people, and I guess kind of going full circle. I feel like going to college away. I know I feel like I keep talking about that, but I've learned a ton with that. Getting to meet different groups of people, you can really kind of in my opinion, better your own judgment, become wiser that way, and kind of use that natural instinct to think critically, but also that other natural human instinct of being social, using others' minds to think together and help each other. Um, I know I'm kind of going in circles here, but it's a very fine line, I think. See you nodding your head, Josh. You got something?
Yeah, I mean, my other point to that, I think, would just be the fact that when we're trying to kind of figure out like how much is too much, we still kill animals and eat them. Like food's still a big industry with animals and all. And we don't think in our head like animals deserve more of a say. So while I'm not trying to compare anybody to like animals in a sense, I think my point with that would be if we were super inclusive, we could try to say that all of that's bad and we should be living in perfect harmony with animals. I mean, there's just a level of inclusiveness where like a lot of people can agree maybe it's too far. maybe a distinction can be there. But the only reason it's different between human to human is because humans have so much more power in how the world works. And I guess one of my questions, which could, for the group, would be, what's the ideal that we're actually trying to achieve? I mean, are we just trying to achieve a world or like a place in which there's no stigmatizing, everybody really accepts everyone? Because in the attempt to reach that ideal, we also have to consider like what's lost. So I guess Nick, my question like in response would be, what's the actual perfect or ideal world that we would be going for in dismantling these beliefs?
Yeah, that's it's a great question. You got to think deep about it because something I thought about as we were talking about like a world in perfect harmony, perfect everything is crime and kind of deviant people, deviant behavior that way, and kind of how that would fit in because if say everybody's free, everybody's equal, there's absolutely going to be that human element of greed that I think steps in, and kind of selfishness, and that's going to kind of send that awry. So I'm not exactly sure where that develops, where that line is, because I think you can think of your like dreamland, fairy tale world where everybody's rich, everybody's got plenty of food, plenty of money. There's no crime, no hate, no nothing that way, for lack of a better saying. It's a fascinating point because I think in a lot of senses the world today is probably as good as it's ever been in terms of being accepting, and we obviously have a lot of work to do, but at the same time a lot of work has been done. Um, whether that's for the certain rights for different groups of people, being more accepting of different people, different identities, lots of sorts of different ways, whether that's sexually, whether that's different religious backgrounds, whether it's different ethnic backgrounds. There's all sorts of ways. So I guess my point in saying this is that we absolutely do have more work to do, and getting to that kind of perfect world. I don't exactly know what that perfect world looks like. I don't think we've gotten there yet. But I guess at the same point, we shouldn't get discouraged either, because I do think we have done a lot of work, and we have made a lot of progress that way.
So you have faith in people?
Yes,
Nick?
I do.
You do?
I do. I think
Josh?
people generally are good. I don't think. I guess I should say I do think there are bad people out there, and I do think there are selfish, greedy, whatever people. But I do think people are good. Yes.
And Josh, what do you think?
I definitely agree with Nick. I think my perspective on the situation, I mean, I don't know how much like you guys learned in like even like when we're learning history, we have to learn about like all of those different philosophers from the Enlightenment era and their perspectives on people. And I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was like Thomas Hobbes or one of the philosophers believes people are inherently selfish, like they're inherently evil, they're inherently greedy. And I think my initial counter argument to that would be, then why do we still struggle in our conscience, right? Why do when we do a bad it's almost like when nobody's ever done a really good thing and started to feel regretful about it within their heart. Maybe the regret came because the good thing was giving away some money and then you ended up getting scammed. But then that's just because you didn't think you did a good thing. Or you gave away some money, now your financial situation's struggling, so now you feel bad for yourself. But I don't think there's that many people out there in the majority of people in the majority of like humanity that can do a good thing and then regret it. But I think a lot of people can obviously do bad things and then regret it.
Mhm.
So I think if there's ever an argument to be made that doing good can hurt, I think that the only time doing good can hurt is when the external factors of the current world we live in, which has already been kind of plagued with greedier and more selfish ways, has played a role in interfering with that. So that would definitely be my perspective on the situation.
Yeah, I think I agree. I'm certainly not a philosophy major or anything, but I mean, it's really fun to talk about. The only other thing, kind of with your perspective, I thought of is like, why do we feel bad if you do a bad thing? Like if people were bad, if people were looking to hurt, if you're only selfish, then why would you feel bad if you say like you stole some money from someone that needed it a lot more than you? It's because your heart, your conscience, your soul, whatever. And honestly, that's something we could talk about too. What do those things mean? But what that kind of inner guidance is telling you to do. The reason you feel bad, say for taking money from a homeless person, say, is because deep down in there that's not the right thing to do. And people I think generally, at least, I do think there are some bad people out there. I'm not trying to say that, but people do have morals that way. People have good guidance that way. I guess part of getting that might be how you're raised, and kind of maybe like a parental guidance slash like whatever environment you grew up in, like someone with two rock solid parents versus with one parent not there, the other very busy, versus someone who grew up without either of their parents. Maybe they grew up at a different family member's house. Maybe they grew up in some governmental system. How that type of thing would impact someone as they grow up, as they're a teen in their adolescence, and then even later as they're adults, like how that would look and how that would change you. Maybe that's how kind of less morally straight people come out. I don't
So
know. I'm not
is
sure.
it, we're going to be out of time, and these shows go so fast, and maybe one day we'll do them, more often. But I know that, there's a lot of fear surrounding, youth today and suicides. And we're dealing with a lot of that, right? I think your school, Nick, I was talking with a bunch of people the other day, had like 12 a semester students commit suicide. I feel like the stigma is a part of the root cause and what
Yeah.
they live up to. So, what's your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I want to say, one, it's really a shame what's happened at NC State. If you know somebody, go in there. I know we have very recently established the Student Mental Health Task Force. Campus is offering a ton of resources that I and many other students have used already. So if you know anybody in the community that needs those, I'm sure we can get it linked to the show in some way to use that. Even if you're not an NC State student, the stuff can still be useful. But bottom line, I guess don't be afraid to talk to somebody. You're absolutely, and I want to say I mean this in the best way possible. You're absolutely not alone. You're not the only one struggling with something. Other people are there to help you. Other people are there to talk. And no matter how bad of a day it is, the sun's going to come up tomorrow, whether you like it or not, and the world's still going to be here. Life does go on, no matter how hard it is. The next day will come. Yeah, Marilyn, like you said, state has been struggling. I know I'm not exactly sure what the number is. I know we're very rapidly kind of getting to double digits if we're not there yet, and it's really a shame.
Yeah.
I think it comes from a lot of people not really feeling like they have anybody to talk to, and like they're kind of going through it alone. Because I know a lot of NC State STEM programs, specifically like the science, tech, engineering, and math programs. I know that's where a lot of the stress students come from, and I know a lot of them personally as some of my best friends here. The courses can be pretty hard. A lot of homework for a lot of different courses. A lot of long study hours in the library just to come back and get a 40 on your next exam.
So I have a question.
Sure.
I have a question. And I hear that there's so much pressure with everyone, right? I mean, there's so much to teach. There's so much for me to learn. There's so much for you to learn and all that stuff. Should we make college longer so it's not so like slam packed? In other words, college is supposed to be four years. High school is 4 years too, right? Well, should we make it longer? Should it be 5 or 6? Or that won't make any difference because they'll add more work to the syllabus.
I think that's a great idea. And I think that for a lot of students, using a 5th year is a perfectly good idea in order to help balance your life. Because having, a pretty standard course load for NC State students is 5 classes, which is, give or take 15 credit hours, 3 per. If you have 5 super difficult classes at once and you're doing hours upon hours of homework every day for weeks on weeks, you got exams, you got midterms and finals and projects and everything, it really piles up on you, and it really takes a toll. And honestly, we're so young at this point still. You could be 28 and graduating college and still have the world in front of you. You're still a baby. So yeah. So I think using that extra 5th year, taking a gap year if you need it, you know, putting yourself and putting your own mind first is a tremendous idea, no matter who you are.
Well, that
100.
was a really good point. And I don't like to interrupt you all so much because you're so great, but I did want to get to some things before we go.
Sure.
And that was a really good point. And the other point, and Josh, I think you'll be able to answer this one. With all the pressure going on in school, and then you have all the pressures at home, and you have all the pressures wherever, is how is that, all that making a difference in stigmatizing and making our kids nuts?
So in from a stigmatizing perspective, it's definitely still harder to tell because stigmas are such a like unique and vast thing. In terms of making kids go nuts, I think one big struggle that comes from all of this is the fact that and everyone has different parental situations, whether they're your ultimate source of support or you can't find like a lot of support from them. One of the things that makes this one so hard is this is a case where people that you might trust, parents or guardians that you trust, are also placing their faith in you to perform well in things like school and extracurriculars and activities like that. And once your source of trust, maybe you'd go talk to your parents about like feeling bad over a rejection. Maybe it depends on the person. But now that person you would talk to about this is gone because they're even if they have the best intent in heart, they are the ones causing the problem. And I think kids can feel this like split between confronting their parents like a villain when they know their parents also just care about them and want the best for them. So I think the biggest key things that they need to take away is number one, why are you doing all of this? Right? Like, what's the point? And if the point is to be happy in life, obviously the future is something you need to take into account. But there will still always be the average person living their life with just the right amount of workload. If they're enjoying it the whole way through, they're enjoying life more than even a more successful person might be. So, I think that especially with like school pushing kids, driving them nuts, the biggest things that first of all, parents, I mean, addressing all adults here is just take the moment to remind them that this isn't really their entire world. A kid's mind is being shaped, especially in adolescent years, so drastically with all of these like ideas being pushed on them. This is where they're building their philosophy. And if you make sure to take a moment to remind them how much there really is to the world, I mean, I'm about to use the most extreme example to paint the picture. You could stress so much about doing so good in college. Let's say, hypothetically, with the purpose of becoming successful, like monetarily in the future. And then what if the next day a billionaire just decides for some reason they're going to give you all their money? Then you would almost feel like if the goal was really just the money, you wasted all that time learning to get a good job, a good career, and now it's just been handed to you. And so obviously you still went to college as a safety because you can't guarantee that tomorrow like Bill Gates or Elon Musk is just going to decide to give you $1 billion. That's why you did it. But my point is with that analogy, if you don't enjoy the journey, then you wasted the time. Because end results only last for a second. I think everyone can agree with the feeling of working so hard to achieving something, getting it, feeling so proud, but then eventually you acclimate, you get used to it. So I think the biggest things is that kids need to learn and really, really internalize. And I'm saying that because it's such a generic like message. Kids really, really need to take the time to learn that it's about the journey getting there. That journey can include stress because a good amount of stress is what brings about the feeling of rewardingness. If I didn't work hard to get something, I don't feel as good when I get it. So I think parents need to remind kids that this isn't all there is to their life. even if you flunk out of college, if you have some talent with the right mindset, the right effort, you can find a way to channel that. Um, it's just about knowing about the journey. So I went in circles for a bit there, but definitely the point of that rant is that I think kids nowadays need to understand why they're doing things. And that's different for everyone. That's where you need to take the time to self-reflect on why you as a person are doing those things.
And you started off by saying that early on, didn't you? And that's what you started with by
Yeah, I
saying
made a similar point talking about stigmas too.
that.
Exact same thing. Why people do, I mean, Nick made the point way earlier or a bit earlier on in the show about how, we went from those few people wearing a mask is kind of weird to you not wearing a mask is weird to in some places you wearing a mask is weird again. It's because the why they're doing it is what's different. Once everyone agreed that we need to wear masks to like lower the spread of COVID-19, it's not weird anymore. But because we didn't think about it from that perspective off the bat, we stigmatized at the start. So I definitely say that motivations, a key takeaway is that motivations are kind of what allow us to gain perspective and insight into people.
Cool.
Yeah. I guess I have one other thing I wanted to say based on your great point there, Josh. I want to say foremost, I was absolutely blessed with two great parents. Did a great job, supporting me, having my back through everything. Something my dad always put on me was that school is school. Like, I would always be all right with class, whether I got an A or whether I got a D or whatever. School is school. School's not really the most important part. You're there to go experience everything. You're there to go learn about just kind of living. And that's kind of each level. Um, you know, starting out in kindergarten, you know, just learning my ABCs or whatever isn't the most important part. Going to, going to elementary school, meeting new kids for me, then like going to middle school, being integrated with the other elementary schools, science classes isn't the end of the world. And then kind of even like all the way on to college now as I'm about to graduate college and looking at graduate school. School is still just school. Like school is still only a part of that pie. So I think Josh, to your point, and back to Marilyn, the point you were making for any student struggling, there's absolutely more to it than just the school or just that final like performance output. There's so much more you can learn, so much more you're there for, so much more value than all of that.
And that's why we're doing this, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Exactly. So we're almost out of time, but we will be back next month, right? The second Monday in April, which at this moment in my looking at it, calculating would be the 10th of April.
10th.
Right, 6 o'clock Eastern time, but of course we're on the internet, so you can catch us anywhere you go. Just have the link, and we'll be there. So, a final word, Nick.
You're doing great. Talk to people about whatever you need. And I love you.
Good for you. They love you too.
Yeah.
Josh?
I think definitely the absolute biggest thing. I mean, I'm saying it for my sake and the sake of a lot of kids, teenagers, adolescents, young adults. Really, really ask yourself where somebody's coming from and why somebody is a certain way. No matter what the context is. I mean, if you see a kid who's a little like socially awkward, for example, think about why, right? Think about if you were in their placement, would it really be the same way? I think the biggest things other than that is also understanding motivation. If a kid really annoys you, it's okay to be annoyed. You have the justification to your feeling, but just ask yourself why they are that way. Thinking about that is what allows us to dismantle like fundamentally held beliefs.
Fabulous. I mean, these two guys are just like phenomenal. And to do this came with stigma, you have to understand, right? To the world. I mean, this is a new thing for both Josh and Nick, and I completely respect both of you. And just so you all out there know, whatever they talk about, whatever they decide to talk, is up to them. I'm just here for the ride and helping the bus stay on the track. So anyway, with that, I want to thank Amnon so much. He's our producer. He's in the background. If you have a story to tell and you want to come on here, if you have an idea, please share it with us. And then Nick has been busy at work putting together our YouTube channel called
Psych Notes.
psych notes. It's going to have all kinds of stuff on there for teens, young adults, all kinds of information and little tips and tricks and suggestions. And so with that, we're so happy you came. We look forward to being here with you again next month. And get in touch. I mean, you can reach me at marilyn@marilynshannon.com and just share with me anything that you'd like. And we would love to talk about everything that we can possibly talk about. So we'll see you soon, everyone. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.